Now that the animation has been keyframed, effects have been added, it's time to render this, get it out of After Effects, out into the world. Although this is a good time to look at any like finishing touches, any effects that are fairly time consuming that you've had turned off, you can turn them back on. One thing I see here is with the speed of the pendulum motion, you might want to have some motion blur. Motion blur is something you can turn on and off. It slows down rendering while you're working on things, so very often it is turned off while you're working. I'm going to go ahead and apply that. I'm going to select all the layers here and collapse them so we aren't seeing the keyframes. The only thing that really looks like it could use motion blur are the clock and the arm. But I might as well apply motion blur to everything that's moving here. To do that, this little icon here is the motion blur. I have these selected, so when I clicked it turned them all on. So that turns it on for the layer. To actually see it though, you have to turn on motion blur for the composition window here, otherwise you won't be seeing it. Also remember that I'm viewing everything at half resolution and scaled to an odd percent. So here we're actually seeing the rendered pixels a little more clearly. You can see the blur here in comparison to the slower moving clock up here. All right, so we really have to render this out to see all this. To render things in After Effects, you select the composition you want to render, go to the composition menu and select Add to Render Queue. That opens up a new tab down here. You see the composition and 3 different areas where you have settings. First are render settings. I can open that up and you can see all the render settings. You can have presets, so here are some built-in presets for settings. Whatever you select, you can go in, click on them, and change whatever the settings are. So if I click on best settings, you see quality set to best, full resolution. We don't have frame blending. Field rendering is off. Motion blur. We're using motion blur, so we want to check what it says here. Motion blur is on for checked layers, that is the layers that I told to have motion blur. I could turn it off. I could tell it to use whatever I currently have set, but I want to turn it on for the layers I applied motion blur to. Render either the entire composition or just the work area that's been set within that. In this case, it's the same. It's a 20-second long composition, and I'm using the normal frame rate, 29.97. So that's all good. I didn't have to change anything in there. For the output module, there are presets here. If you click on where it says lossless, which is going to give you perfect quality but very large files, you can go in and see some of the different possibilities. For this class, you are mostly going to be using QuickTime. And within QuickTime, you are going to be using the H.264. This is a very good, high-quality compression. It's the industry standard. It's what most video that's broadcast is in these days. if you look at high definition video on Blu-ray or cable cast, this is the type of video that you're seeing. I'm not doing any of the options, resizing, cropping. There's no audio, so I don't have that checked. The last thing to do is tell it where to save the file. And this is going to be called clock.movie, and it's going to go right into my demo folder. Once you have everything set, nothing happens until you click the render button. This is because this is a queue, which means you could actually set up several different animations or set several different versions of this. We could have multiple compositions that's the same animation but just formatted for different types of output, queue them all up, and then start them all rendering together, and you go away and you come back when it's done. This animation shouldn't take very long to render. The motion blur means that it's going to take a little more time. Alright, it's finished rendering. And here it is. Let's open that up in the QuickTime player. Well, it doesn't line up exactly. I'll go ahead and hit play. So here's our full resolution 720p animation with motion blur. 20 seconds long.